I grew up in Lincoln, Rhode Island, played hockey my entire life. My first visit to Dr. Weiss was after I injured my wrist in college. I didn't come to him right away. I just thought it was a sore wrist. I just played through the pain, not really realizing it was as serious as it was. After a year or so, I said, I better go take a look at this. By the time I got to him, there wasn't enough ligament left to sew together.
I've known Dan for a couple decades. I saw him after he basically had a ligament tear in his wrist and didn't do anything about it, like a lot of young people, and even older people do that too.
And he basically said, listen, there's not a whole lot we can do at this point. And he said, when it gets painful enough, we can then do a partial fusion. Went several more years before I finally came back to him and said, hey, listen, I can't take it anymore. I'm handy. It got to the point where I couldn't hold a drill gun in my hand anymore. It was very hard for me to golf. It was hard for me to play hockey. So that's when I finally had the first partial fusion.
We could initially treat him by doing partial resections, taking out little parts that were bad and partially fusing other parts to kind of stabilize the wrist.
It was better for a period of time. 10 years later, I went back for the second fusion. It helped with the pain, but it did limit my mobility.
Those last 10, 15, 20 years, he got some mileage out of that, but eventually everything breaks down and you get arthritis throughout your entire wrist.
This last round, it was to the point where I would have to take Motrin to play hockey or a round of golf because my wrist would just be so sore. And then it got to the point where, sleeping at night, it was painful. And that's when he said, all right, what do you want to do? A replacement or a full fusion?
Historically, the only way to really treat that was to fuse the wrist completely solid. So that basically means that somebody has a wrist like this and they can move their fingers, but they can't bend, extend, or flex their wrist at all. Dan's a hockey player, plays golf, so a fusion really doesn't really work with that.
I opted for the replacement because it allowed me mobility. Obviously, you don't hear about wrist replacement so much. I had a hip replacement done 5 years ago, much more common. One of his partners, Dr. Katarinsik, she's a good friend. And so I called her up and said, hey, what do you think about this wrist replacement? And she told me, if I were to have it done, there'd be only one person I would allow to do it, Dr. Weiss.
So this is the implant that we designed.
Come to find out, like Dr. Weiss, he's been very involved with the patents of this wrist procedures for many, many years.
Wrist replacement surgery has been tried over the past 5 decades, but the implants were not very good quality. But they've evolved over time. So we did a lot of research work in our lab. We had a big NIH grant and tried to figure out how to better design an implant.
He's one of the leading hand surgeons in the country. And I was very fortunate to have Dr. Weiss right here as my original hand surgeon to be the one to do it.
We came up with this implant here. It's really designed to mimic exactly how the wrist used to function. It's the first really implant that does that. We've been putting them in fairly predictably now in people like Dan, who've kind of run out of options, don't want to have the wrist fused, still active, want to play sports, golf, tennis.
He could have recommended a replacement any time in the last 25 years. He never once suggested it until the very end when we ran out of all the other options. So that also gave me a level of confidence that he wasn't trying to rush this procedure.
So this is your new wrist implant?
Outpatient. I was in and out the same day. It went very, very well. I couldn't be happier. It's probably the most successful surgery I've had, and I've had a few.
It's been life-changing for me and for my patients. It really is one of the most intellectually fun operations to do. I love the procedure. I love that I was involved in the design of this, and it's used by surgeons all over the country. And I love that the patients are doing exceptionally well. And it's really changed their lives, which makes me happy.
If you do have an injury, go right away. Don't wait a year. If I had seen the doctor earlier, it may have been a different outcome for me. In the event that it's recommended that you have a wrist replacement, I would not hesitate to do it. I've been extremely happy. I'm very, very fortunate. I have more mobility now than I did 25 years ago, and I'm pain-free. I can golf, I can play hockey with no Motrin. I'm very, very happy with this. It's been a huge success.